History gets polished, edges smoothed. But revolutions are not clean. They are born in fire, in smoke, in men who hold the line when fear claws at the ribs. Victory was not inevitable. The revolution was forged in war. But it is understood in conversation, around tables, between friends, with books open and arguments alive. This is Rhode Island, ground truth of the American Revolution.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Ben Powers coming at you from Rogue Island with our co-hosts Bjorn and Grace. Say hey, guys.
Hey, how we doing today? I'm Bjorn. This is my daughter Grace. You want to say hi? You want to tell them where we are right now?
In New York.
But what are we doing? Oh man,
You guys are on the ultimate Revolutionary War road trip, is what it sounds like.
Absolutely. We've been to West Point. We've been to Fort Montgomery. Where else? We went to Frauncer's Tavern.
You guys went to Trinity Church, right?
Yeah.
And we saw Alexander Hamilton and
Eliza Schuyler.
that's right.
Did you guys go to Bowling Green too?
We
Yeah.
did. We
Nice.
did. Yeah. And I showed her where, they cut off the crowns on the fence and all that. So,
Grace, I'm going to put you on the spot. I got one question for you before we get into this week's topic. So when you go to Bowling Green, what's so important about what you don't see?
The crown. How no. The statue.
That's right, the statue. And who is the statue of?
King George.
And what happened to it?
It got cut down because he was poo-poo. And
Awesome. Great answer. Good job. So
Yeah.
Bjorn is going to host this tonight, guys. He's got some cool stuff to talk about. I'm not going to steal his thunder, so I'm just going to turn it over to him so he can tell you what he's been working on and what we're going to talk about tonight.
all right. Hey, guys, welcome back. This is our 5th episode. And we've decided that since May the 4th, yes, not the Star Wars May the 4th be with you, but May the 4th is a significant date, and it relates to Rhode Island because May the 4th, 1776, 2 months before the Declaration of Independence came out, Rhode Island declared independence on its own,
Wow.
right? So, you think of the Gatsby, you think of, and I wrote an article about, the Providence Tea Party, all these things associated with Rhode Island. And yet, not a lot of people realize that Rhode Island was the first colony to declare the independence before anybody else. Small state or colony, big footsteps, right? Now everybody sees, hey, okay, Rhode Island's taking these steps. Let's follow suit. Let's see how they react, because the number one issue was, well, if we declare independence, how are we going to be able to govern ourselves? How are we going to be able to create a government that's going to be able to control and give us the rights that we deserve? And that was the hardest part, is transitioning.
Gotcha. So I've already got a bunch of questions, but why don't you set it up for us a little bit before I start firing?
Yeah, absolutely. So May 4th, 1776, numerous things had happened prior to that. We had a burning of the Gatsby where, the British already claimed that Rhode Island was one of the worst colonies out there that were causing issues, weren't listening. We were the terror child, I guess you could say.
The rogues, as it were.
Yes, the rogues, absolutely. And we knew we wanted independence the second the Gatsby happened. We knew we needed it. We knew that, and when I say we, me being from Rhode Island, so I'm going to assume Rhode Islanders, right? I'm going to say that it's because they were being treated poorly. And then one of the other issues is, after the Gatsby, the Crown had ruled or stated that they want to take those responsible and ship them over to England where they deserve a trial. And we were like, absolutely not. How is that okay?
It's not a jury by your peers automatically if you're taken out of your home colony.
It is. And it's almost like, well, that's you know you're going to be convicted automatically when you get over there, right? They don't like you. They already said we're one of the worst colonies out there for behavioral and all that. So what do you think's going to happen? You know, if that was you as one of those guys that was part of that gas being, you heard that, how would you feel?
I would feel like I was being set up.
In a manner to be like, yeah, they're doing this on purpose. They want to show control. They want to dictate everything that we're doing, right?
That's definitely how I would perceive it in that situation.
Absolutely. And I don't know, and I believe most of the people there, not just those that participated in the burning of the Gaspee, but the neighbors, the people that were there for the Patriots and believed in freedom and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence felt the same way. Those who weren't involved were like, you can't do that. You're taxing us up the wahoo for tea and for the paper and everything you can possibly imagine. And when we stand up, now you're going to send us halfway across the world to be heard by the king you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
I understand what you're saying.
I don't know if I'd be able to, if I'd fight that either, you know? Would there be an urge to fight and be like, enough is enough, right? Was that the breaking, point? Was that the straw that broke the camel's back? And I believe it is.
For Rhode Island, certainly. And then after what happens in Massachusetts in April of 75, I'm sure those guys are immediately ready to pitch in and support. I mean, by May, they've sent Nathaniel Greene and his army north to support the siege of Boston. And then here we are a year later. So obviously the events of the past 12 months have fired up the leaders of Rhode Island to take this step to declare independence. Now, how did they prepare to do that? Did they have a state convention, kind of like the Continental Congress, or how did they communicate and come to this conclusion that they were going to take this step?
So the understanding was, first of all, this just didn't happen overnight. This took years, right? Years of resistance to the British, years and years and years of them being mistreated and getting their stuff taken care of. So what happened was, in a legislative action, in the Providence Gazette reported that an assembly gathered, and there was an assembly proceeding, noting that the legislator had taken measures removing the authority of the crown from government functions. So I would imagine they all got together. They went to this huge assembly. They're like, and they heard, I mean, you have two sides going back and forth. What are we going to take? What's going on? Right. And they came to the conclusion that we need to remove all authority from the king out of our legislation and out of our rules. Did
the legislature actually vote on this?
They did. These accounts are significant, not because they proclaim Rhode Island's primacy, but because they demonstrate how independence was understood in real time.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So it's not like we disown the king or like we hate the king. It's more of we want our freedom. We want our own rights. We shouldn't be ruled by a guy 10,000 miles across the ocean,
Now, was there still a royal governor in Rhode Island at this point?
There was, and actually, there was, going back to, how we were talked about being sent over, to England for trial, that royal governor actually ruled and stated that should not happen. So he kind of took the side of the colonists at that time. So even Rhode Island, when Rhode Island acted for that declaration, Continental Congress remained constrained by the instructions of individual colonies, right? So Rhode Island's doing its own thing. They didn't want, the Continental Congress is like, good luck with that, right? We don't want anything to do with that right now, which is funny because then you have 2 months later, you see that the they all get together and they declare independence.
Well, of course, we're all watching, John Adams on HBO, and we know that New York was, awaiting instructions from their legislature, and South Carolina was, vociferous against doing this. Pennsylvania wasn't excited about it. So there's certainly a lot of acrimony going on in the Continental Congress that Rhode Island probably did not have so many constraints. I don't know if their legislature were as divided, but they certainly didn't need the votes of 12 other colonies either.
So one of the really, really big issues is that the Congress thought independence was inevitable. The problem is that they thought they lacked the authority to declare independence. So how they knew it was coming, but they didn't know how to do it properly because they still think they had to get the king involved.
Interesting.
Right? So now you're caught in this conundrum is like, well, we know we want independence, but is it going to cause more issues if we go to the king to do something? So actually, you're just talking about John Adams. Writing in May 1776, John Adams observed that every post and every day rolls in upon us independence like a torrent. So they know that it's getting closer and they can feel it, right? I get goosebumps thinking of it because it's closer and closer and closer. And they're looking at Rhode Island, and this is my opinion, is when the Rhode Island declared independence, Continental Congress wanted to watch to see actually how everything played out, right? Because they're not going to say, hey, we're declaring independence now as soon as the British come over, and now Rhode Island is no longer, part of the original 13. The British are there. They're going to be like, no, we're not doing that. We saw what happened to you guys. We're not doing that. So they want. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so what mechanisms did Rhode Island put in place for the practical stuff? We declare independence on the 4th of May, but so who's in charge now? How are they running business?
That's a question, right? I still think they were trying to figure out. I believe the king was involved to a certain extent. The problem was trying to create the laws and remove the king. So I believe the British were still in charge. They weren't going to take charge until the king was fully removed from the laws. If that makes sense. So it states with Rhode Island's action on May 4th must be understood within that broader context. Its legislator addressed not only the question of independence, the practical problem of governance in a time of revolution. It's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because you're on your path to freedom, but then now you're like, oh, we just got caught out in the middle of nowhere. What do we got to do now? We have no leadership to do that. So by removing the king from its legal framework, the colony resolved the contradiction between fighting a war against British authority, and continuing to operate under it.
Interesting.
Right? So I'm sure there are people on both sides say, we need to just get rid of everything and rule ourselves, where other people is like, well, you got to learn to crawl before you can walk.
So this is almost an interim step between being a English colony and the Declaration of Independence 2 months later, where they are declaring themselves as the 13 United Colonies to be, completely free of the king's authority, whereas they're trying to figure out how to operate in the royal context, but without Parliament dictating laws to them.
Yes, absolutely. And the colonies. So Stephen Hopkins was a former governor, and he was one of Rhode Island's delegates to the Continental Congress from Rhode Island, right? He had argued for years and years that acceptance of parliamentary authority would reduce Americans to a state of absolute slavery.
Gotcha.
And I believe that wholeheartedly. I mean, we see what happened through the war, right? Look at New York, look at Boston, look at all these different cities, and look how the British treated everybody, right? So I agree wholeheartedly. Alongside him in Congress was a man named William Ellery, a Newport lawyer who would later sign the Declaration of Independence. So now you got Stephen Hopkins and William Ellery. Okay. Ellery's diary shows a glimpse into the mindset of the delegates as independence approached. Reflection on the moment of decision in 1776, he recorded his close observation of fellow delegates, noting their seriousness and resolve as they committed themselves to separation from Britain. He goes, while he did not specifically describe Rhode Island's May 4th act, his account captures the gravity of a decision that this colony had already implemented in practice.
Gotcha.
So they already had this going. They knew, okay, we're doing this. They knew it. They were doing it. Now they have to learn to put it into play, right? And I am not a politician. I am nowhere remotely smart enough to be anything close to that. So I don't even know how to begin saying, okay, how do we remove the king from everything? You know, what step would you take? And now, if Ben, that was you, what step would you take first to remove the king?
I imagine you would have to look at the laws that govern your everyday processes and craft new ones and then vote on them to put those in place. Say we still recognize the king as a sovereign. However, parliamentary law no longer applies and the laws of the Rhode Island legislature still apply. Because it sounds again like they want to operate under that royal authority, but not be constrained by parliament's laws. So you're almost going to have to rewrite and vote on the laws that govern your colony or your state in this instance, if they're declaring independence. And I imagine, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, and I don't know anything about this history. You teach me something new. I imagine they based a lot of their laws on British law, but they just removed Parliament's authority and replaced it with the legislatures.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. A lot of the law that they took was from the British, right? Because their main goal is, yes, we need a government, but we don't feel like you over there on the other side of the world trying to control what we do in taxes. We have our own right to be here, right? We have our own right to govern ourselves and to live free without the dictatorship and ruling of somebody across the ocean, without, military enforcement, because that's what he did. He sent troops over.
And Rhode Island had to be what about in terms of it being a colony, when Roger Williams founded it, it's about 150 years old at this point.
Yeah.
So they probably have a fairly rich legal tradition to build on anyway, even though its basis is going to be English law.
And I think you're right on with that. But even to go further, I think they were more based off of the religious aspects to it, right? Because Roger Williams was a religious, that's why he was kicked out of, yeah, right? So I think they were basing that off of too, like where, we have our God-given right to rule ourselves, to be free. We don't need this guy across the world to rule us. So it's funny. So just 11 days later, on May 15th, the Continental Congress adopted a resolution urging colonies to establish governments under the authority of the people.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So here you are, May 4th, Rhode Island declares independence. Now the Continental Congress is like, okay, we're going to let you guys start creating governments on your own. They're not saying we're declaring independence. We want to start building up to it because they know it's inevitable, right?
Provide that framework, turn those committees of correspondence or whatever other provincial committees into more of a working government.
Yep, absolutely. And actually, John Adams later about that May 15th decision stated or described it as the most important resolution that was ever taken in America.
Cool. That's all. I love John Adams. He's one of my favorites. I know a lot of people.
Yeah, and he's smart, and he points out things that are blatant, that are there, that actually make sense. Because you get a lot of these people that say, well, this, and this. he writes things and he points out how important the small things are, right? Not just, oh, we had a battle, that, the small things. And that's what I like about him. And not all observers, now, where I'm going to kind of pull back to the Delancey side here, not, as a Tory and a loyalist, not all of the Rhode Islanders wanted this, right?
Of course.
Not all of them, not all observers wanted such developments. Like loyalists saw them as unlawful and a destabilization of the colony, which I could see, because if you're starting off and trying to create your own government, how much chaos will there be?
No, certainly. Now, did Rhode Island face an exodus of loyalists, kind of like Massachusetts did? Like, hey, we're just going to leave the colony. We're going to go to Canada, or
no,
large loyalist
more of them
presence?
stayed, because you're looking at loyalists that were in Newport, like in the rich, the places that have a lot of money, right? The loyalists, where like the trade, right? They were making money off of the British, right? The trading and all that. They weren't going anywhere because they
Gotcha.
knew the British,
Was Newport like a loyalist enclave for most of the war?
It was. I mean, because you think about it, right? The biggest, port, like sailing port in Rhode Island, was Newport. You had your molasses come in, you had tea. It was also known for the slave trade that was there, right? The slaves would come in. So they were like, well, no, we're going to stay right there. We're not going to go anywhere else. We're going to stay right there, because that's where we know, number one, the British are going to be there. They got their, the Navy, right, going up and down the coast. We're going to be protected, right? So that most of the loyalists stayed there, while a lot of the loyalists flocked there.
I see. So I want to frame this question correctly, because to my knowledge, things didn't devolve into a civil war the way they did in the southern colonies later during the war. But was there basically two governments in Rhode Island at this point? You have the Patriot Legislature based off the 4th of May Declaration, and then you have the Newport Enclave, which remains under British rule and British law. So there's basically two Rhode Islands at this point.
Yeah, pretty much. And I keep going back to Newport, but that's the hub of the loyalists. That's where the British were, right? They weren't going to Providence. They weren't going to, Warwick. They were staying where the trade in the harbors and where the ocean, where the Navy was able to come in. So they're controlling that. And actually, we talk about the Battle of Rhode Island, right? A lot of loyalists in Newport were spies for the British. They would tell troop movements. They stayed there. But now, don't get me wrong. Of course, there were people that were in Newport that were against the British. I mean, they burned farms and houses and all that. So, but a majority of the people in Newport were on the British side. They were loyalists. And a lot of people didn't like that. And there was one guy who was a loyalist named Joseph Galloway. He argued that independence had been the work of a desperate faction.
That's an interesting way to put it.
I thought the same thing, but it kind of makes sense, because at this time they're small, like they're breaking away into this faction, right? It's an attempt to gain control and cause havoc, and that's what he thinks is going on. And that he also said that it had usurped the powers of government. So when I think of that, where they're trying to control the powers of government, that's what I think he's trying to say in something like that.
Taking the power away from Parliament, taking the legitimate government into their own hands.
Yep, which he didn't like, because now it's taking money out of his hands.
Of course.
Right? So then, in similar, the British viewed Rhode Island's long-standing defiance as evidence of unreliability within the empire.
Gotcha.
So that's another way to think, like what the British thought of Rhode Island, right? They're unreliable. They're not going to be able to do this. and events later in 1776 would confirm the risks Rhode Island faced. It exposed coastline. The coastline made it a target. Excuse me, back up. Exposed coastline made a target for British operations. And in December of that year, British forces occupied Newport. The Assembly's decision in May did not provoke this occupation. Rather, it acknowledged the reality that the colony was already fully engaged in war.
Fair enough. So do you feel if Rhode Island hadn't taken that step that things might have moved slower in Congress? Do you think this
Absolutely. I think we would have gotten there eventually. I think more colonies would have been hesitant and they would have stretched it out as further as possible, as far away, because if no colony did what Rhode Island did, the force that the British had there already, right? They're building up in the ruling, they would have been hesitant to actually do something about it, right? They're gonna be like, well, let me see. We'll do it tomorrow. And then when tomorrow comes, oh, we'll do it next week. You know what I mean?
Yep. Somebody's got to be first.
Absolutely. So when Rhode Island did it and they actually can see, all right, maybe this is something that's going to be able to work. Okay, now we're on board. Hence why 11 days later, Congress was like, okay, now you guys, the other colonies, you can create your own government. Start working on creating your own government.
That's awesome.
It is. In Rhode Island, I mean, again, the smallest colony, but the biggest, to me, the biggest impact, because like we just talked about, if Rhode Island didn't do it, what other colony, in your opinion, if Rhode Island didn't do it, what other colony would you think would step up to do something like that?
I would want to say Massachusetts, just out of hometown pride. And again, because you had guys like Sam Adams and John Adams who were pushing for independence. But at the same time, I'm not sure, but I would like to say Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I would. So my two guesses would have been Philadelphia or New York, Pennsylvania or New York. One of those two. I think Massachusetts would have done it. I think they were not as organized to do it at the time. I mean, you got Sons of Liberty running everywhere. You got all that stuff going on, where now you got New York, which is a bigger, area. If a bigger state kind of takes control, okay. And that's why it's so funny that the smallest colony is the one to kind of take control and declare, you know what I mean?
No, I get what you're saying, man.
It's like David and Goliath, right?
Oh, that's awesome, buddy. So we got about 4 minutes left. So is there have we hit your major points, or do we need to wrap with something that we haven't talked about yet?
No, and I think, I'm going to go off topic and talk about Rhode Island and fourth. I think people should, stop. And if you guys are listening and hearing this, stop and realize what May 4th truly, truly means, right? Because May 4th, if May 4th, like we just said, didn't happen, when would the real independence occur? Would we still be occupied by Britain? I don't think so. And I think that people need to stop and realize the importance of the steps that Rhode Island took. It may not have been perfect. But again, you saw what happened just days later, like 10, 11 days later, when Congress is like, okay, we saw Rhode Island. Now you guys can create your governments. And that is a massive, massive step. And I think people need to stop and realize and be like, oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, I know we had, Independence July 4th. But what about May 4th? 2 months before. Did Rhode Island cause that? Did Rhode Island lead the Congress to do that and for all these colonies to get together?
Well, I mean, there's certainly a correlation there. Maybe not definite causation, but there's definitely a connection. Absolutely no doubt in my mind. So,
yeah, I mean, I just love it. And while we're here, Grace and I are going to a Pines Bridge Memorial tomorrow, or it's a commencement or they're doing a reenactment of what happened at Pines Bridge. So we're going to go out there and take a gander and watch what happens, and hopefully we
Awesome.
get more information. So
I'm looking forward to hearing about it. So real quick, Grace, before we got about 2 minutes left. I saw you nodding when I said I like John Adams. What do you like about John Adams?
I just like how he
his philosophical ways.
You like his brains, you like his courage,
Yeah.
you like how he doesn't take any crap from anybody.
yeah.
That
I
doesn't
don't know.
surprise me. Spoken
I
like a
think I'm
Brooke
a-
Shaw.
I don't know, but I'm a Sam Adams guy.
That-
I'm more of a.
that
He's a
doesn't surprise
rebel,
me.
right? That is, yes, true. It's the rebel in him, And I think and Grace and I actually talked about this. Is
The other day.
we
Yeah.
were like, okay, what would you rather do? Would you be Sons of Liberty, and would you rather be this rebel, or would you rather be one of these guys that says, use your pen and write things and bring it to Congress?
We did. Yeah.
I was like, Sam Adams all the way.
I'm a
Sam
John
Adams.
Adams guy, man.
Oh,
But you
see,
know how-
you're the one that would come to my house because I'm hiding from the British and be like, what are you doing?
All right, guys. Well, hey, it's been another great episode of Rhode Island. Remember the contributions that Rhode Island had to the 13 colonies and to the cause of independence. I'm Ben Powers, and this is.
I'm Bjorn Bruckshaw, and this is.
Grace Brookshaw.
So, hey, thanks for coming out, guys. We'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks. Have a good night, guys.